Not one, not two. It's the show where you told you're not you. It's nothing in the middle, nothing in the middle, nothing in the middle, nothing in the middle of nothing. Hi, I'm Joey Lott, and welcome to the 8th episode of Nothing in the Middle. And you may be wondering, how do I keep track of what number the episode is? And I do that by counting, just in case you were curious. So it's been a while since I recorded one of these, because I've been doing lots of, very special kinds of enlightenment-only activities, like sleeping and eating and hanging out with my family and writing and, taking shits, usually daily, for those who are curious about that. So, but that's what enlightenment is like. It's very, got a lot of special enlightenment-only activities that you have to deal with, or else you'd lose it. You want to hang on to the enlightenment, so you got to do what you got to do, right? It sucks. Okay, so, but in all seriousness, we got a long list of questions, and let's get right to it. Yeah. So it says, 2 days ago, laying in bed, I had such a feeling of happiness wash over me, and I just lay there in the happiness. Sounds nice. It just felt awesome and huge and all-encompassing, and yet somehow just vast and empty. I kept saying, thank you, thank you. Then eventually it seemed to dissipate or end or whatever. But, of course, I want to cling to this. To make it special. To make it happen again. Which I know is not the thing to do. But how can you not wish or want that to happen again? It seems like that is the goal, even though I know it really isn't. Right, so nice things happen, and when nice things happen, that's nice. That's why they're nice, right? And so this notion of I shouldn't want the nice things to happen is kind of a perversion of what I'm actually suggesting. We've all done this, right? It's sort of it's a strong conditioning that we say, oh, okay, now I know that the goal is to have no goal. So if there's ever a goal, then that must be bad. So I've got to resist that. Like, wanting nice things is bad. But that's, it's a little bit silly. And not only is it a little bit silly, but it could be a lot silly and quite unpleasant. So I'm reminded of medieval monks wearing hair shirts and flogging themselves, and doing all kinds of stuff trying to prevent themselves from having any kind of sexual desire, for example. This notion that we have to deny pleasure in order to achieve some kind of more desirable state or condition, or non-state or non-condition, if we're really if we're really evolved or something. That's an old story that it's not the truth. It's never been the truth. It just keeps on getting taught or learned or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how it comes about, but it's worthwhile to take a look and just see that there's no reason why that has to be the case, right? There's no reason why it's actually true that we should not want nice things to happen. Wanting nice things to happen is, it seems natural to me. I like it when nice things happen. Why not? Why wouldn't I? To not want nice things to happen would make you kind of a masochist? Is that what it would be? It's like there's no need to deny yourself pleasure or to deny the desire for pleasure when that is what is happening, right? But it's useful to see. I mean, there is a certain insight in what it was written here that can be useful, which is that when stuff happens, it's impossible to find the cause of it. So just take a look and see that for yourself right now. Like, what's happening right now? Can you find the reason why it is happening? I mean, can you pin all of this on any one cause, or even any two causes, or three causes, or four causes? Can you trace it back to some origin or a source? So if we say, well, I should not desire things, then subtly, or really not so subtly, we're saying, oh, there's a source for this action or this impulse. The action or impulse of the desire for more nice stuff, or the clinging, so-called. But that's a distortion. It's not an accurate representation of what's actually observably happening, right? I mean, so if you just take a look right now, you can see that what's happening cannot be traced to a source. You can't say that, I mean, you could say, but I would suggest that it is likely, at least impossible, to find the one who supposedly is doing the desiring, the one who chose the desiring, and the one who should, so-called, or supposedly, choose differently, right? Should choose to suppress that desire. So the trouble is just that we can get really wrapped up in that, and it's like an inversion of the same old, same old. We think it's different, but it's not. It's really just the same thing that's been inverted. So now, instead of saying, oh, well, I'm going to, be happy by arranging all these external circumstances in the way that I think they should be, we say, oh, well, now I know that I can be happy by denying myself the desire for anything. But same basic thing. So I would say just take a look and see that it's not true. And then it's possible to soften the whole thing, because if you take a look, whatever is happening, if there's an impulse or a desire that's seemingly happening, well, that's already here. What are you going to do about it? Ironically, the belief that it shouldn't be, or that it's a problem in some way, or that there's something else that should be happening, some better experience, which we imagine might be like freedom from desire, or stillness, or whatever we imagine it might be, then that's just a resistance to what's already the case. So the desire itself, so-called, I mean, I would challenge you actually to find the desire. You can't. But we're telling a story about it, so it's as good a story as any. The desire itself is not a problem. It's just what's happening. It's not actually happening for anyone. It doesn't mean anything. It's uncaused. But the resistance is what is so unpleasant. And don't take my word for it. I mean, I'm just suggesting that you could take a look, and you might see that this is the case. Don't try to take this on as a belief. That wouldn't really be helpful. But just investigate for yourself and see if what I'm pointing to is actually the case. Might be surprised to find out that the resistance is what makes it unpleasant. And it's possible, actually, in my experience at least, to soften the resistance. And how do you do that? Well, one way, I mean, there's a million ways, I guess, but one way is to just to take a look, to question the assumption being that this shouldn't be happening, or that there's something else that could be happening that would be better. Like the fantasy that if I didn't have this desire for pleasant things to happen, then that would be more pleasant. So you can just question it and see that it's a little suspicious. Not really sure what the foundation of that is. Can I actually find any substance there? How do I know that that's true? Did God tell me? And if so, how can I rely on that voice of God? How do I know that's actually God? What's His authority? What are His credentials? Who certified Him? Right? I mean, so if we really take a look, we'll see that we don't actually know. There's no proof that the assumption is actually the truth. It's actually just an assumption. It's a story. It's a fantasy. So that's one way that may loosen the whole thing. Another way that I find very useful is to physically relax. What I've noticed is that oftentimes in these situations we tell a story about physical tension. So there's some physical tension, and we don't know why that is. I mean, we can come up with theories, and they may be relatively useful. Some of them I think are, and I share some of those on occasion, but it doesn't really matter. It's just that if you take a look, you might find out that there's tension there, and that the tension has a story that there's some prevailing theory at the moment as to why that tension is there. Oh, the tension must be because I had a desire. I got to get rid of the desire, because if I get rid of the desire, then I won't have the tension. But I suggest, take the shortcut. Don't worry about the story, because that story can change and it's not the truth anyway. But just go directly to the tension and see if it's possible to soften it. Just to relax right now. Notice where there's any tension in the body. And notice that the tension is often interpreted to have some meaning. The story associated with it, but that in truth we don't know what it means. We don't know that the story is accurate. It's just a story. So for just a moment right now, relax. Let go. Soften. See if once there's a relaxation, if it's necessary, if it still feels at all relevant to try and figure out and address the story. Okay. Let me see if I've really addressed this. There's a lot of talking. Anyway, yeah, I would say the desire for nice things is natural and normal. Why resist it? Why resist anything? Now, I'm not suggesting that oftentimes we can think in very binary terms, right? It's either A or B. So we can imagine that, either I have to resist the desire for something, or I have to indulge it. But that's not actually what I'm proposing. I'm proposing that there's let's just say a more a way that is inclusive of all ways, and that embraces all apparent paradox and doesn't struggle with trying to reconcile the paradox, because in the relaxation or the softening, it's seen that the paradox was false to begin with, that all the separation and duality was false to begin with. It's a false premise. So, see if that was helpful. Okay. Next, we say, I have read non-duality books. Nope. It says, I have read in non-duality books. And then in quotes, you know that you are. And, also in quotes, you know that you exist. They both sound the same to me, and I agree with them. Then I read that a teacher said, existence is a concept. Do you know what is meant by that? I have no idea whatsoever. I don't ever know what anybody else means. But I would suggest that understanding of any of this stuff may provide some sort of temporary fix, but it is very unlikely to be satisfying in any kind of real way. Tends to just further reinforce the compulsion or the seeking, So I'm not a big fan of the, I'm sure I've written it somewhere, but I'm not a big fan of that approach of you know that you are, you know that you exist. Because it tends to reinforce the idea that, at least in my experience, I was looking for the specialness of that. I'd say, okay, yeah, I know that I exist, I know that I am, but how is that special? There's got to be something hidden in that will be special in some way. Otherwise, why am I looking? And it tends to reinforce the sense of individual self, separate self, which it's fine, but I just don't see it as particularly valuable, at least not in my experience. So, but if somebody says existence is a concept, I don't know. I really don't know what was meant by that. It could be in the right context, I suppose. It could be a very profound insight, but oftentimes I'm just not sure, without the context, how it's relevant, to be honest. I would suggest, though, that whatever the case is, it doesn't matter whether we say that you are or you are not, or there's existence or there is no existence. It's a concept, it's not a concept, there's ultimate absolute truth, there's not. That none of that could possibly actually be the truth. Because the truth is prior to any concept about it, prior to any understanding of it, inclusive of all concept and all understanding. I mean, it's just what's obvious. And, I know a lot of people try to make this, create a special story about, being a human is so special because humans alone have the capacity to wake up to their true nature, yada, yada, yada. I say bullshit. Because if we say there's a true nature, the true nature is just what's obvious. It's not hidden, not special, not withheld, and it's not separate from anything. It's all that is. And so that's available universally. That is the nature of existence, if we're to say there is such a thing, right? And so saying, I'm not a big fan of anything that perpetuates the notion that there's something special. Why am I talking about that? Existence is a concept. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that I have anything else to say about that. If I do, I'll let you know. Next one. I don't quite get what you were saying in your book, No and Home, under the chapter titled Thoughts, where you wrote, no symbol can reference boundless aliveness. No symbol can reference what is. I reckon, that's pretty good, by the way. I reckon it is because of my confusion over the word reference, which means the action of mentioning or alluding to something, and allude, which means to refer indirectly to. I still somehow feel that, say, a drawing of a hand, which of course is a symbol, can allude to a physical hand, if I got wrong in assuming there is such a thing as a physical hand in the first place. Well, yes and no, right? I mean, to deny that there's a hand is an exercise in silliness, right? So I'm not a big fan of denial, but on the other hand, if we take a look at what we say is the hand, and look for the hand itself, the thing itself, we can't find it because it doesn't exist. The hand is actually just a concept, necessarily therefore a symbol. There is no hand. I mean, this you know, I have a I used to work as a computer programmer, so to me it's it makes sense. I'll offer this as a it's not a metaphor, it's an analogy. I'm not sure. Something simile. And it may or may not make sense to anybody who doesn't have an understanding of computer programming. But in computer programming, we have there's a concept. It's called a variable, and a variable is a reference. It's it can be a reference. Let's say there are different types of variables, but some types of variables are references. So the thing, there may be some actual value, and you could have a million different variables that reference that value. So we could have a variable called A, and a variable called B, and a variable called C, which would be terrible variable names, but just for this purpose, we'll say there's A, B, and C, and they each reference a single value. Now, in computer terms, what they're referencing is a location in memory, computer memory. Okay, so they're actually referencing a location, and all three could be pointing to the same thing. So we could say they reference something. But in reality, if we say there's a hand is actually, in a sense, hand is the variable. Hand is the reference, but it doesn't. There's no thing which it references. It's impossible to find that actual thing, like the point in memory. It can't be found in reality. The hand itself can't be found. I've lost everybody by this point. But if you strip away the qualities of the thing that we call hand, the hand itself is not to be found. The hand is just a concept. Or we could say that hand is a reference that references nothing. It's empty. Yeah. So you say the drawing of the hand to you seems to be a reference to a physical hand. In a sense, there's some, in one sense that's true, but the physical hand itself doesn't exist. It's only ever a symbol. So let's say you draw the hand, and it's from that perspective. So you now have a piece of paper, let's say, that has a symbol that looks sort of like that. But is that the hand? So then we turn it like that. Is that the same thing? And how do you know that it's the same thing? If you were to take away the color and the light and the contrast, is there something there? What about now? So we could say that it's there, that all we have are references, or all we have are symbols, but the thing itself doesn't exist. So you could conceptually have a symbol. I know I'm losing people at this point, but you could have a symbol that references another symbol, and that could go on ad infinitum, right? And that's sort of all that's going on, is that we've got symbols referencing other symbols eternally. But what is the primal object that's being referenced? We can relate this to, if we say there's a story of my life. There's a life time, a life stream, a life whatever. Come up with lots of ways to describe it. And we can conceptually imagine that all of these things reference a central character, central self. But if you take a look, you'll see that that thing itself can't actually be found. So the symbols apparently exist. I mean, that is the appearance. But they're empty. They don't reference anything. I'm pretty sure I didn't do a good job of satisfying your curiosity on that. So feel free to ask again. I always respond spontaneously, so I'm sure I would, hopefully, I would provide some kind of different response. Next question. The one insight that eludes me is examining the lack of boundaries around ourselves. When I try to find the boundary around my hand, for example, I can find a boundary of the skin, and that boundary seems real. Are you talking about looking at the molecular aspect of our beings, that the electrons are vibrating and moving and therefore not solid? I am struggling with the boundary thing of things that are concrete, like a hand. It's easier to see that there is no me that has a boundary. Okay, so very similar to the previous question. It's a conspiracy, I think. So what I'm really inviting anybody who's curious is to take a look without the burden of concepts. And it seems that we're so conditioned to believe that concepts are real in some way that we're sort of mesmerized by concepts. And I guess we have oftentimes a hard time even distinguishing what is real, which would be nothing, from concepts. So an easy rule of thumb is that if you can imagine it, or think of it, or conceptualize it, it's a concept. So to say, for example, I can find a boundary of the skin, you have a concept. Find the skin itself. If you don't rely upon the concept, can you find an actual boundary? You'll notice that it kind of comes back to, I guess, I mean, as I'm looking right now, there's a very strongly conditioned, in most cases, I guess, concept, which is a concept of, several closely related concepts, I guess you could say. There's concept of self and other. There's a concept of possession. There's a concept of distance or space. So if there's what we call looking at the hand, and if we rely upon those concepts to filter and provide a story, something that we can hope, that we imagine we can understand, then we miss or overlook what's obvious. And when I say it's obvious, I don't mean that it can be understood. It can't be understood. It's just what's obvious. So if you remove, not the greatest selection of words, but we'll go with it anyway, or dispense with the concepts, or allow the concepts to be transparent as they are truly. So don't cling to them, don't grasp to them, don't rely upon them. See through them. It's a metaphor, but it's just a way of pointing to just try and to offer a way just to experience what I'm suggesting. So the concept of self and other, let that go. Look at the hand and just let go of the concept of self and other. So it's not that you can't know for sure that I'm looking at that self and other. You can't know that for sure. That's conditioned. That's learned. It's conceptual. But directly, that's not present in any real sense. Not in any kind of fundamental sense. It can be dropped or seen through. So right now, just drop it. Don't try and get this. Don't try and understand it. Don't try and believe something. Just let go. Just notice that the seeing is not dependent upon the concept of self and other. Along with that is the concept of possession, my hand, my seeing, my eyes, my brain, my perception. None of that is fundamental. It's possible to see through that. Just for a moment, let it go. Relax. Notice that the seeing is still happening. The seeing is not dependent upon the concept of possession. Then let go of the concept of distance or space. So that's for many of us, it's a strongly conditioned concept. And I'm not suggesting that you need to get rid of it. You don't need to get rid of any of this. It's not that there's another way of seeing that is better, that you need to get a new conditioning. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just suggesting that it's possible to see the concepts are just concepts. So they're fine. Nobody needs to do anything about them. They're allowed. It's totally, absolutely allowed. They're not bad. But they can just be seen for what they are. So for a moment, just drop the concept of distance and space. So it's not that I'm over here looking at my hand over there. Notice that the looking, the seeing, is not dependent upon the concept of space. Space is actually just an inference. It's made up. It's a very persuasive concept in many respects. And again, I'm not suggesting that it needs to be gotten rid of, but it's possible to see just for a moment that it's just a concept. Notice that the seeing is happening without any dependence whatsoever on any of those concepts. So it's like you can imagine, I mean, it's just a story, we don't know that this is true, but you can imagine that a newborn infant, prior to the conditioning and the learning of what everything is, there is seeing without the concepts. The seeing is primary, it's fundamental. The concepts are not. So then it says, are you talking about looking at the molecular aspect of our beings? And definitely not. Because that's still another story, it's another concept. I'm suggesting simpler, much simpler than that. Just drop all the concepts, just for a moment. And like I said, you don't need to get rid of them. They're allowed, they're fine. But they can just be seen for what they are, which is concept, which is not fundamental. And I don't know if that's actually necessary or useful. I find that it can be, because in my experience, oftentimes we can be fearful of the unknown, I guess. I mean, but the thing is, it's all unknown. Or we can be fearful of uncertainty or insecurity. But it's all uncertain and all insecure. The concepts, therefore, when they are believed to have some kind of fundamental or primary reality or power, can give us a sense that now we have some control, now we have some power, now we know what this is, now we can defend ourselves, now we can stay safe. So it gives us the certainty, or the illusion of certainty and security, but all along we know, we've got that niggling sense of, anxiety, I guess you'd say, right? It's like, this shit might hit the fan at any time. And we know, fundamentally, I have no power. I can't control any of this. So we've got a conflict. And I'm suggesting that it's possible to see that with a simple exercise that's fundamentally non-threatening, although it may be experienced as threatening, but something as simple as just looking at the hand, or looking at the wall, or looking at a chair, and noticing that, A, the thing itself can't be found, and B, the looker, the observer, can't be found, and C, that all of the concepts are unnecessary. The seeing, experiencing, or being, we could say, whatever, is not anything that we imagine it to be. It's just what's obvious. That the obviousness, let's say, is primary. Completely not dependent upon any of the concepts. So when we can see that for something as theoretically, at least, non-threatening as a hand, then it may potentially allow for a greater relaxation or release into and as the unknown, the uncertain, and the insecure in all situations and at all times. Because it starts to maybe be known or discovered in an almost a felt sense that it's okay to be insecure and not to know, and to be uncertain, to have no ability to defend or protect or understand. Doesn't mean that it fundamentally changes anything, because it doesn't, but it removes that, in a sense. It can remove the sense of having a position separate from everything else. So, I don't know if that was helpful. Okay. I have many questions because these days my story is full of fear and suffering about circumstances around me. I know conceptually, and more important, see that this, with a capital T, is all there is, and that me as a central star is illusion, but that doesn't decrease suffering and fear. It does to some degree, but it's hard to accept that this, with a capital T, is it. Maybe I don't truly see what's going on in reality, and I am stuck. Don't know what to do anymore. I don't want to search anymore. I know that I don't choose to search, and I can't stop search on my own, but so whenever there's a capitalization of anything that is not merely a function of the way in which language is normally written, like the capitalization of the first letter of a sentence, or a proper noun, like a name. And specifically when words like this and that and here and now and spirit and things like that are capitalized, it's a kind of a, let's say, it's a red flag, which to me suggests that there's still a sense that there's something special, and that there's something I mean, it goes hand in hand with there being something special, but and I'm not sure how to word it. There's just that there's something, I guess. Some insight, some knowledge, some position, some state of some sort that can be attained. Now, most people who write such things will deny that that is, at least in my experience, oftentimes when I point that out, people deny that was the intention, which is fine. You know, I'm fallible. I could be mistaken, but I wonder then why the denial and defensiveness about it. And I'm just suggesting that if you're willing To just let go of all those concepts. It sure is a relief. It's a dropping of all the burden of trying to be someone. Trying to contract, define, protect. All the stuff that we don't want is the stuff that we do in an attempt to get what we think that we want. And so it's, I guess it's scary, right? I mean, it's scary in a very primal way to let go. To let go of all that burden because we've mistakenly identified as that. Let go anyway. Just let go. So it says, maybe I don't truly see what is going on in reality. That's right. And it's wrong at the same time. You do see because it's obvious. It's impossible to miss it. It's just this. Not a special this, not a special state, not something that comes and goes. Not only pleasant stuff, not only expanded states, not only the thought I've got it. This is it. All of what is happening, always. This right now. Even what's called confusion, even what's called frustration, even what's called resistance. All of it. This is it. It's just that we've given, we believe the story about it instead of the obviousness. So the obviousness cannot be missed. It's just this. It's just this. I'm not talking about something special. I'm not talking about something hidden. Just this. Whatever is happening. And notice that whatever is happening, you can come up with a story about it, but the story is not the happening itself. And yet, prior to any story, prior to any concept, whatever is happening is happening. We don't know what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. Because anyway, it's impossible to know. If for no other reason than simply because you are that. You're not the separate observer. Take a look. Right now there's what we might call seeing or hearing, experiencing. And then it's imagined that there's something over there at a distance. Even if it's a near distance, there's always some sense of distance. That's where stuff is happening. It can be objectified. Relationships can be created. And then there's something back here, separate from it, even if only just barely. The observer. That's me. I'm the observer. I'm the experiencer. I'm the feeler. I'm the thinker. I'm the one that's aware of all this stuff. But take a look. Is that actually true? Can you find whatever it is that's supposedly separate? Can you find any of it to be separate? Can you find the division? That's what I'm always going on about boundaries. I know it turns out to be confusing for a lot of people. So I got to figure out other ways of expressing it. Or not, I don't know. I mean, I just, so there's a challenge there. Can I express or point in a different way? I don't know. We'll see. But just take a look and see if it's true that there's actually someone who's separate from what's happening, and if what's happening can actually be objectified. And just, I don't even remember what the question was. Oh yeah, so truly see what's going on. Yeah. So the idea that it could be understood, if you really take a look, you'll see. I suspect, at least. I mean, I have yet to be able to find a division between anything. So the divisions of inner and outer, here and there, observer and observed, it's all conceptual. But the boundaries themselves, the divisions themselves, I can't find. Can't find anything separate from the seeing, experiencing, feeling. So then it goes on to say, I don't want to search anymore. I know that I don't choose to search, and I can't stop searching on my own. To me, that sounds like there's still a trying to understand it. But I would suggest don't try to understand it. Just let go right now. Seriously, this is a very low-key episode, huh? It's okay. So just let go. Just let go for just a moment. This is the end of the search. It's the beginning of the search too. Are you sure there was ever even a search? Just let go. Sometimes, we talk about searching and seeking and efforting and all these things, and they're not actually true. None of that stuff is actually happening. You can't find it. They're just stories that may be useful in revealing that none of it's actually happening. That there's only ever just this. That there's no one separate from what is. That whatever is happening uncaused, without a reference point, without boundaries, has no history, no future. That's all. I mean, anything that can be said is really just, as cliche as it is, it's really just a pointer. It's just pointing to what's already the case. So don't mistake the story that's being used as a pointer for reality. It's not. Just pointing. And it's always just saying, hey, relax, let go. You might notice that when there's this, what we call seeking, there's what we would call a physical tension. There's a somatic component. I say component, but it's the whole of it. It's not separate. It's it's all that's going on. So if that is relaxed, physically let go. Always right now. Don't worry about trying to achieve some perfect state of relaxation, but just let go right now. Relax right now. Soften right now. And there's no end to it. The letting go goes forever. So don't try to arrive somewhere. Just let go now. Relax now. And you may discover that, hey, what am I even talking about, seeking? What is that? Can I even find that? It's just giving an identity to something. It's a term for that, reification. But the object or the entity itself doesn't exist. Okay. Next one. Could you say a few things about hope? As it is very common in spirituality. I tend to get caught up in hope because I think somehow that if I read more and listen to more non-duality media, I will get it eventually. In the future, of course. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I would, I mean, in my experience, it's useful to let go of hope. We don't usually want to because if you, I mean, just right now, let go. You can just notice where you're holding on, seemingly, to the hope of something, right? It will be better than this. I won't be in pain anymore. I won't suffer. Only have nice things happen. I'll finally be able to let go. That's, we hold on to the hope. And as you pointed out, hope is always about the future. Has to be. So in a sense, it's an overlooking or a denial or a resistance to what's happening right now. But if we tell the truth, we don't want future enlightenment, future bliss. It does no good. No good whatsoever. You don't want it in the future. Whatever we want, when we finally tell the truth, it has to be right now. We have to want it right now. So right now, just let go. Just notice where there's a holding on, physically holding on, in the shoulders, in the forehead, hands, feet. Just let go. Thoughts might arise, so-called. Just let go. Sometimes this can reveal what I think previously called primal fear. Let go. Just for a moment, just now. Notice that what's being called primal fear, terror, whatever. It's a physical sensation. At least to some degree. Just let go. Just for a moment. Whatever those fears are, whatever images come up, whatever scary thoughts may present themselves, you can notice that right now, presumably, if you're watching this, you're at least relatively physically safe. Most likely. I could be mistaken, but in most cases, if you're watching this, you're probably safe physically at the moment. As safe as as safe can be. So notice that whatever those thoughts and images and ideas and concepts are, they can't actually hurt you right now. And maybe, finally you just realize that you're tired of so much work trying to defend yourself. Against what? Against ideas. Against fantasies. I mean, it's kind of odd because I didn't grow up in a particularly fundamentalist sort of religious environment, but I had a fear for a long time of for lack of a better way of putting it, for being condemned to hell forever. Because because I didn't have strong enough faith, because I was a heretic, because I blasphemed, all kinds of things, because I was not a good enough person, because I had bad thoughts, because I was mean-spirited sometimes. All kinds of things, and I felt that if I just let go, it was like admitting it was like settling for badness. That was the fear. Settling for being unworthy, sinful, and then who knows, but maybe be condemned to hell. I personally, I didn't have I didn't subscribe to the traditional view of what that would mean, but it was close enough. I wasn't that creative. It was just it was another variation on the theme. So I don't know what your thing is. I don't know. But just see if maybe you can relate to that. That sense of, if I let go, if I stop being hyper vigilant, if I relax, then I'll have failed in a really big way. Like, in the sort of way that I might, just between you, me, and God, I might have fucked it up forever kind of thing. And who knows where that comes from? I mean, again, we can have all kinds of stories and theories about it. And I found that some ways of contextualizing that can be useful, have therapeutic value. But for right now, who cares? Just see that whatever that is, it's exhausting. It's completely exhausting and unpleasant to live with that kind of fear. And what we do about that, how we react, that's different, in every case, but fundamentally there's that fear for most people. Some people react to that by with meekness and insecurity and self-hatred and, take that kind of route. Other people act out with violence and anger and, it's all different ways of reacting, but if we just let go enough, at some point we discover this fear. Or not, I don't know. But usually. So just be willing to let go for a moment. Be willing to fail completely. There's no escape. Just be done for now. So what was the question? Oh yeah, hope. Yeah, give up hope. You're not going to escape from whatever it is that you want to escape from. You know, I mean, you are, however resourceful you are, however talented and intelligent that you are, and you've used all of that talent, intelligence, and resources attempting to escape unsuccessfully for a long time. I mean, you know, if you're young, then maybe just for a few years, and in most cases for at least a few decades, you know. So why do you think that you're going to suddenly be more successful? And if you were to escape, which I don't think is possible, but just if we were to even indulge that fantasy for a moment, then what? Because we've all had moments where we imagine, oh, maybe I've escaped, maybe I'm free, maybe this is it. Right? It was like somebody wrote earlier, you know, you have those moments, you're laying in bed and it's just like, thank you, thank you, thank you. I remember when years ago, I had this day, and it was just like, you know, it was like being on acid, but I hadn't, you know, I hadn't taken any acid. It was just like, and you know, but in an entirely pleasant way. It was just wonderful. It was totally open. And I just went out. I lived in LA at the time, and I just started walking around and like giving stuff away to people. It was like, you know, I love you, and you know, it was blissful, just spontaneously. And there was a sense of, this might be it. I might be free. I might have escaped. But then there's that anxiety. Well, maybe I haven't. How would I know if I've really escaped? Maybe I have. Maybe I haven't. Have I? Ooh, what does that feeling mean? Maybe that feeling means I haven't escaped. Uh-oh. Well, I gotta try harder. Ignore it. Ignore that feeling. Be more manic. Yeah, that's probably, if I'm manic, then I'll probably be able to sustain this. You know what I mean? It just gets stressful to worry about whether you've really escaped or not. And ultimately, escaped from what? I mean, that's my language. I don't think that was what was here, but that's to tell the truth about it. That's what it comes down to, right? I mean, you want to get it. That was the language. I will get it eventually. Get it. It's a euphemism for escape. Escape from the unpleasant stuff. Escape from being me. Everything that I imagine that means. So just let it go. Just let go. Right now, what's the problem? What needs to be gotten? So we imagine ourselves to be something, some limited entity in this vast universe, and we're afraid that it's a hostile universe because we have experience of that. feels like a struggle all the time. And we just want to be able to relax. So we hope we can escape from this hostile universe and come up with various strategies for that, at various points in our lives, depending on our conditioning and circumstances, we try out the prayer or the law of attraction, or just working really hard to make a lot of money, or becoming super healthy, just loading up on green juice or something like that, because we think that this is it, this is the thing, this is the ticket. If I do this, I'll be safe in this hostile universe. I'll have built up a fortress, which of course turns into a prison. But then we can come to, let's face it, most of us come to the non-duality teachings as sort of a last resort. We've tried a lot of other stuff. Not everybody, but a lot of us. We've tried a lot of other stuff and we get more and more desperate. Because this is a pretty desperate move to come to something that says, there's no escape. So we're usually pretty desperate by the time we get to messages of this sort. But we still twist it. We still imagine that despite the fact that people say there's no hope, give up, this is it, there's no escape, we secretly translate that into there's hope. I'm going to be able to escape. I just have to look at it the right way. I have to do these non-dual exercises. We got to go to the workshops, have private sessions with these special awakened people, so that it will rub off on me and then I'll be free. But that honestly, that's not what's being said. I'm saying give up and tell the truth, which is that whole story, the premise is unsubstantiated. The idea that you are a separate self in this great hostile universe is just not true. So if you're fighting against the fear, you can't win that, because for so many reasons, but among them the fact that the fear presupposes this story that is not actually observably true. So the more we fight against it, the more we reinforce the sense that this story is accurate. So we sort of have to be willing just to feel that fear completely without any protection, being totally vulnerable, in order to discover that the idea that we have of ourselves is not true. We have to allow maybe there's another way, I don't know. I don't know of another way. This is the way that I know. But the way that I know is to allow yourself to be destroyed. I mean, I hate the violence of that, but it seems to be the most accurate way to describe it at the moment, at least, is to allow yourself to be destroyed, as if it is yourself being destroyed, as if you are the separate self being destroyed. Not in some sort of fantasy way, but just allowing whatever is happening to happen without that habitual contraction and armoring. Because what happens is that out of habit we contract and armor, and then we say, aha, see, that's proof. That's proof that I'm a separate self that's being attacked by a hostile universe. But when we soften and relax and be totally vulnerable without any armoring or protection whatsoever against our ideas and fantasies. I'm not suggesting that it would necessarily be a useful strategy to just stand there as somebody attacks you with a knife. Right, I mean, please understand that. But I'm just talking about the conceptual stuff, the fantasy stuff, which is like almost all of it. If we just allow the feeling, the fear, the intensity without any resistance or armoring or self-defense, just relax physically in spite of the intensity, then we're left with the reality, which is, oh, I'm still here. I don't know what I am. I don't know what this is, but I'm still here. So it's so all of that energy is not then occupied in this constant attempts to defend an imaginary self that's not there in the first place. At the very least, not in the way that you imagine it to be, right? We're just getting more and more chill in this episode. It's getting so relaxed, I think I might take a nap. All right, next question. Oh, we're going to be at this for a long time at this pace. We got to speed it up. If there is no one home to make decisions, why is there at times the very real experience of choice and decisions being made? For example, I frequently experience a seeming choice of either indulging a thought and following the story it presents, actively turning away from it by the use of some technique, or rather passively letting it sit right where it is with the risk that this thought turns into not very sensible action. So I would say that, saying there's nobody making decisions, it's true in a sense. But like anything, it's not the literal truth. It's just a story that points to I guess we'll just say reality, for lack of a better way of expressing it. So if you take that story literally and you try and understand it and turn it into a framework from which to try and understand life and keep yourself safe and control things and all of that, it won't be helpful. It will just lead to more of the same, because it's just being co-opted at that point. So I'm not suggesting really that anything needs to be or really should be taken on as a belief. I'm really just inviting for taking a look to see if the assumptions are true. And so normally we assume, oh, I'm the chooser. I'm choosing things, so I need to make good choices. If I make good choices, then good for me. That means I'm on my way, I'm righteous, I'm going to be rewarded. I'll be granted enlightenment and I won't have to suffer and all that sort of thing. Or if I make the bad choices or the wrong choices or however it's imagined, then, oh, well, that's bad and I'll be punished. And if nobody else is going to punish me, then I'll punish myself by, mentally and emotionally flogging myself, tensing up, contracting, resisting, worrying, or trying to compensate by doing some sort of virtuous rituals. I'll pray a lot, or if I've transcended prayer and that whole notion, then I'll do what? Like I'll meditate a lot, or I'll read a lot of non-duality books, study the scriptures or something, right? But I'm suggesting that you can just take a look and see if it's possible to find the chooser. So let's not even get hung up on, are you making choice or not making choice? Just look to see if you can find the chooser, the source of the choice. Or another way to look at it is see if you can find the choice itself at the moment that choice comes into form, let's say. I mean, you can see it starts to get silly because of course there's no choice. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. It's just a story. In reality, we can say that what is happening is happening. That much seems to be reasonably undisputable. We don't know what it is that's happening. I mean, as soon as we get into what it is, then that's tricky. But we can just say that whatever is happening is happening. And we can have a story about what's not happening, but that's not reality. So we have to have a story about what's not happening in order to infer the existence of a choice. So to say, well, I could have gone to Barcelona, but I went to Madrid instead, right? That's like the sort of thing you'd have to learn how to say in Spanish 101. Probably Spanish 102, right? Because of interesting tenses. Could have gone. But, I could have gone to Barcelona, but I went to Madrid instead. But guess what? You went to Madrid. There was no choice made. There was just going to Madrid. Going to Barcelona is a fantasy. Didn't happen. So the idea of a choice relies upon this notion that something else could have happened. Says who? Could have happened. There's an expression which I kind of like, coulda, shoulda, woulda. It's like, okay, coulda, shoulda, woulda. But totally useless. Has no relevance to anything. It's like, okay, thanks for sharing. I can tell you a story about Little Red Riding Hood. It will have just as much relevance to reality. So, you can't find the choice because it's an inference relying upon a fantasy. And then you can see, I mean, obviously if there's no choice, there's no chooser, but, we still imagine that there's somebody who's making the choice. Even if there is no choice, there's still somebody who's experiencing it, let's say. Somebody experiences going to Madrid. Okay. Can you find the experiencer? I'm not suggesting that you deny the existence of the experiencer. Don't take that on as a belief. That's just forming a new religion. Who needs that? Just see right now if you can find the experiencer. Who is experiencing what's happening right now. Is there actually someone separate from this? Okay. Next question. Could you talk about boundaries and how one looks at them? Y'all are part of a conspiracy. Okay. I sort of see one thing leading to another ad infinitude. Interesting. I imagine the air next to me connected to the wall, connected to the outside space, including trees and sky and space, and it goes on and on. No boundaries, and it's all one, and this body is part of that, of this. Yeah, okay. A lot of concepts. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that we mistake, that we're so accustomed to being mesmerized by the concepts, so we don't even recognize them for what they are. But I'm saying that's all concept. Don't try to understand. Understanding is always predicated upon concepts. So forget about that. It's useless. Understanding is absolutely useless. At least as far as this is concerned. I mean, maybe if you wanted to build a bridge or something, some sort of understanding might be useful. I mean, I'd probably feel more comfortable crossing a bridge that somebody who had some understanding had built versus somebody who had no understanding. But if we're talking about suffering, fundamentally that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, the desire to escape from suffering. In that case, understanding won't do you any good. Understanding and the search for understanding is, in fact, in my view, the problem. So give it up. Forget about understanding. And if you really give up understanding, then you have to see that this attempt to make connections and relationships between fantasy objects is just part of that striving for understanding, and it's of no value. It's just another fantasy. And as far as fantasies go, it may seemingly produce some kind of experience that may be relatively pleasant. Like, you can take certain drugs, and those drugs may produce certain experiences that are pleasant or unpleasant. But, and so there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, pursue understanding all you want, or take drugs all you want. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, in a sense, going the other direction. Turning away from, not the greatest way of expressing it, but I'm not suggesting a denial, but I'm just suggesting just relax. Notice how much effort is necessary to try and understand or grasp or get it or figure it out. Even to, like it says, I imagine the air next to me connected to the wall. So notice how much effort is necessary to imagine the air. Not a great deal, but some. And then the wall. You notice how much effort is necessary to imagine the wall. And if that's not evident, then for a moment, just relax. Relax the gaze. Really relax. Relax the forehead, relax the brain, relax the jaw, relax the shoulders. And notice that whatever is happening, apparently, doesn't actually require any effort. Even what may have been called air or wall, a moment ago, notice that that happens without any effort, and that to imagine it as air or imagine it as a wall requires some effort. So just to get a good sense of that, you can alternate for a few rounds just to relax completely, and then to imagine the wall, and then to relax completely, and then imagine the wall. Notice that there's a certain subtle contraction necessary in order to maintain that imagination of wall. And yet, when that's relaxed, whatever is happening is still happening. Or not even still happening, but it's happening. It doesn't require any effort. It doesn't require the imagination. It doesn't require concept of wall. It doesn't require this effort necessary to establish some sort of fantasy relationship between air and wall and sky and trees and clouds and universe. Okay. You mention in relation to your own experience that beyond what is happening here, there can be no certainty of anything existing. I take it that this includes any other heres out there. How is this different from solipsism? Offhand, I'm not sure exactly the definition of solipsism. It's I'm not sure offhand, but I can address the first part of it. Notice that there's an awful lot of there's a lot of conceptual hoop jumping necessary to try and figure out something beyond what's just perfectly obvious. Let's say that there is something else, but you can't know what that is. By definition, let's say, you can only know what's obvious. Anything outside of that, we can imagine that there might be something hidden. Like, I'm looking at a camera right now. I could imagine that there might be something hidden behind the camera. But in fact, there's just what's happening. And my imagination, so-called, doesn't really have anything to do with it. I mean, it's puzzling to me now, actually, this common compulsion to try and objectify and label, define, and understand every imagined thing. Because it's A, it's an impossible task, and B, it's pure fantasy, and C, it's unnecessary, because what is obvious is enough. Not in a way, not like, and I know that could be interpreted as like resignation of, or like settling for something, but it's enough in that that there's no end to it. There's no beginning to it. It's impossible for there to be anything outside of this. And if I could come up with a really good way of describing this, I would, but which I may at some point. But at present, it seems to me that just letting go reveals that all that is imagined, this is going to sound very stupid, but it's as close as I can come at the moment. All that is imagined to be hidden or out there, beyond the obvious, is actually already contained in what is obvious. It's just that when what is obvious is imagined to have some sort of definition and boundaries, then the inclusivity and the wholeness of what's obvious can be overlooked. It sounds a bit absurd, I know. Like the sort of thing that you'd read in a transcript of a Nisargadatta talk or something. I try to avoid that, but sometimes you can only, you can only point so much and offer the invitation, and there comes a point at which it has to just be accepted. Like, just let go. Not trying to achieve something forever, but if you want to know, what was the question? Are there other heres out there? Is there something beyond here? There's no way to provide a truly satisfactory answer to that, but it is possible for you to discover that for yourself in what I would say is the infinite or endless, seemingly, satisfaction of letting go. So normally we assume that satisfaction is found in some kind of conclusion, an attainment or grasping of something, like, I've got it. We even use that language a lot in this pursuit of what enlightenment or whatever we imagine that we're after. I'm going to get it. Like there's an understanding or a perspective or something that can be had, and that will be satisfying. But it turns out, at least in my experience, that true satisfaction is the satisfaction that's discovered in the letting go of or I guess we could say the clarity that this right now is it, and that this cannot be understood or grasped or contained, that there's no way of arriving somewhere definite and final and saying, I've got it. So it's like we've gotten confused about what satisfaction is. Satisfaction is not, at least in my experience, satisfaction is not the grasping, it's the letting go. It's the discovery that this is enough. Sorry, that's not a particularly practical. Well, it's practical. It's just won't be satisfying to the intellect, I guess. Because there is a point at which it just simply has to be. You just have to just let go. In your view, are there many heres or just one? And if there's only one, is this one here just with Joey, or is it with the person who wrote this question? Or are they both arising in this one here? No. No. No, you can't understand it. So don't try. It's, hate those moments when the person speaking just kind of gone. Sorry about that. It's just so sometimes, you know, the investigation, it can be so blissful in a way. It's sort of more pleasant just to relax than to try and express that, which there's no way to really express. It's just jump in. The water's nice. That's what I'm saying. Just jump in. Just let go. Wherever there's that compulsive search to understand, let go. Notice where there's a contraction. And just relax. It's like an armor. Let it dissolve. Okay. Similar to the unbounded aliveness you mentioned, the term space often implies our essential nothingness. But the term is a misnomer because space itself is a quality of perception. Similarly, the term dimension is a quality of perception. But in no way can dimension be applied to that which we term here. I mean, it's true in a certain sense. Worth noting, though, that that and here are both capitalized. So just let go. Let go of the whatever it is that attempt to make it into something special. That and here. What that and here are we talking about? It's not separate or different from just this. Normal, inescapable, inclusive of everything. Including the resistance and the armoring, including the unpleasant feelings, including argument, including debt, including shitty jobs, including screaming kids, including sickness, including boredom, All of it. Nothing special. No escape. It's not a certain piece of the whole. It's the whole. Doesn't need to be capitalized. It's not a thing. It's not here as a distinct here apart from all. You know, on the one hand, it's like kind of silly to even talk about. You know, every once in a while, I wonder, what the hell am I even talking about? Because there is, you know, to even talk about it, to do these Q&As, to write about it, to communicate on this subject, if we can call it that at all, in a way is counterproductive, because it's almost unavoidable that it will then be interpreted to be something special, right? I mean, sort of tends to be part and parcel of the whole thing. If I speak about something, then you assume must be a thing. So I understand the confusion. I get it. And, you know, I don't know. To a certain extent, it's unavoidable, I guess. I mean, I do, in a certain sense, I do have an interest in communicating as clearly as I can about this matter, whatever the hell it is. But at the same time, at the risk of further reinforcing the notion that it's something special, I guess I can say this, that there is something. It's just such a relief that at least I feel, naturally want to share about it. Like I said earlier, it's like, hey, come on in, the water's nice. You know, to have a sense of so much struggle and suffering and unpleasantness for so long, to finally see that it's so much simpler than I ever imagined. I just want to say, hey, it's easier than, maybe not easier, but it's simpler than you thought. Stop making it elaborate. Stop following these gurus who mislead you. Stop falling for these predatory marketing techniques. People who promise you all kinds of stuff like bliss and enlightenment and supreme power of manifestation and, be like favoritism from God or whatever. Stop believing that. And stop resisting whatever's happening right now. That's all. Just let go right now. It's like if we imagine that we need to defend ourselves so much, then it's very unpleasant, and I think it's worth just taking a look, an honest look, and being willing, finally, just to let go. There's so much fear being sold, but you don't have to buy it. And I guess in a sense, that fear and the intensity and the primal nature of it is why relatively, apparently, so few come to discover the simplicity and the peace that's ever present. It's not that they attain peace, they just discover that it's always been peace, that this is peace, even no matter how horrible it is. Not as a way of rationalizing or justifying cruelty or sadism or anything like that, but just to tell the truth about it so that we can finally just, I don't know how to describe it, just to see clearly without all the clutter of concepts. Not that we have to get rid of those concepts, but just that we can see them for what they are so that we're not mesmerized by them. Getting super chill. Okay. So then it says, so I am left feeling that I am asking a question which itself is an impediment to understanding. Yep. Yeah. I'm glad that came through. But I would still like to know what you mean by the suggestion that beyond here nothing exists. I do not mean the outside world, whatever that might be. I simply mean simply mean something. Either I cut off the question or that was the end of it. And my response, I think, is the same, which is stop trying to understand it. If understanding occurs, it's secondary. In letting go, it's possible. In true letting go, it's my experience at least that understanding becomes totally unimportant and irrelevant. I mean, it's always unimportant and irrelevant, but it's seen that it's unimportant and irrelevant, and so who cares? But then understanding may occur, but still, who cares? Because it's seen that the understanding is, like I said, it's secondary, and furthermore, it's not only secondary, but it's just seen that it's not. It's not really the truth. It's just entertainment. Next question. I want to know how it looks like from there. Why, they are called enlightened people describe their findings so vaguely. I have an idea about what they are talking about, but I can't really grasp it. Do you still see your children as your children? How about your wife? Do you hate others? And if nothing changes as you claimed, how come you changed? I mean, you became better. There's so much here. We got to take it piece by piece. So it says, I have an idea about what they're talking about, but I can't really grasp it. And you, by now, you'll know exactly what I'm going to say to this, which is don't. Don't grasp it. Why? What good would it do you? You don't want that. You don't want that. I mean, just look at it for a second. grasping that wouldn't do you any good, because, first of all, grasping anything doesn't do you any good. I mean, grasp anything, you know, like grasp a shoe. What good does that do you? It doesn't do you any good. So stop imagining that it's going to do you some good. And then, for another thing, you're grasping at something that doesn't even exist. You're grasping at, you know, you say basically it's an understanding. So just let it go. Give it up. Isn't it nicer when you just give it up? Like, what do you need? What's missing right now? What's wrong with right now? What is the problem right now? If ever there's a problem, isn't that problem really just a clinging to the sense that there is something else, something better that could be had? And if you just let that go, just relax in the body, let go of the physical contraction, soften, let whatever's happening happen, because it's happening anyway. And then what? What's the problem? So it says, then do you see your children as your children? Sure, why not? I mean, the idea that, so whatever, the seeing is always the seeing. There's just seeing. And there's no problem with that. Whatever that form is. And yeah, of course, I feed my children and I don't feed other people's children. It is what it is. Just the way it happens. I mean, the thing is, we can analyze anything and say, well, why is it the way that it is? Like, why does the sun rise in the east and set in the west? Why? I mean, why not the other way around? Or north to south? Why is a day 24 hours? It just is. That's just what is. You know, why do birds fly? Just what it is. It's just what it is. And so the story of my children being my children, of course, that's the story. That's what exists, and the actions and the emotions and all of the stuff that happens is what happens. But the sense that it should be otherwise, just not believable. Because there's no way to know from what reference point it should be whatever it should be. I mean, it's just seen that it is what it is. Do I like and hate others? I don't really hate anyone, but that but I don't, you know, it could be hate. I mean, hate's just as allowed as anything else. It just so happens that I don't really hate anyone. But that's just, you know, that's just my conditioning. And yeah, I like some people. Like, I tend to like some people more than other people. But again, you know, that's just it's just seen for what it is. I mean, that's a function of. I mean, this is a story too, but if we're going to talk about it, we got to use stories. So it's just a function of the conditioning. I mean, why would anybody like somebody and not like somebody else? I mean, it's not. Given that some people seem to like. I'm sure there's. You find anybody who most people say they hate, and there's somebody who likes that person. So it's not that there's something intrinsic to the character that is unlikable or hateful. It's the conditioning. And, why is it that way? It just is. It's just what happened, I was born into the family that I was born into with those genetics and with those circumstances, and had the experiences that I had. So because of that, we could say, I mean, again, it's a story, but because of that, as far as any story goes, it's a pretty good story. That's why I have the preferences that I have. If things had been different, I'd have different preferences, but I don't, because things were the way they were. And but the difference, I guess, if there's a difference, is that I don't really I don't believe that those preferences are the truth. I don't believe that they mean anything. I'm not likely, but again, just because of my conditioning, but I'm not likely to go, hate some religious group or ethnic group or something like that, and wage genocide against them. Because even if I don't like something, I'm sure I could come up with some political or religious groups that I don't particularly like, but that doesn't mean that I don't believe fundamentally that my likes or dislikes are the truth. Just a function of the conditioning. And it says, how come you changed? I mean, you became better. And I would say, no, I didn't. You should, ask the people around me. I don't think I didn't become better. And the entire idea of better is, what does that even mean? Better compared to what? By what standards do we measure good and bad? There's no absolute reference point for that. Definitely didn't become better on account of I don't even know what that means, and even by like some sort of vague conventional standard, like nicer or more generous or kinder or more patient and those sorts of things, didn't really become better by those criteria to any great degree. In fact, in some ways, less so. I don't really feel compelled to try and make people like me, which I used to. But whatever, like me or don't is not really any of my business. I don't care. And it works well for me because I feel like, well, what I'm not sure what else I would do anyway. I mean, I just can't be bothered to try and project some image so that people will like the image. I mean, what would be the value of that? It just seems like a lot of work. I'm all about laziness, to be honest. So most of the things that I do are motivated primarily by laziness, either that or hunger. And it says, if there's no good and bad, how come enlightened people become good? And again, we don't know what that would mean in any absolute sense. But even by most conventional standards of what good would mean, I would say that that's not a true statement. I mean, a lot of I mean, I could list off probably off the top of my head. I won't, but I'm sure we could all think of numerous examples of so-called enlightened people who've done some pretty nasty stuff. You know, like pretty nasty stuff by most standards. And the trouble is that because people are so hung up on the idea of good and bad, and it's like very black and white kind of thinking, then they either they tend to either, hey, it's God. We have a phone call scheduled at this time every week, and but he can leave a message and I'll call him back, because you know this is more important than shooting the shit with God. Anyway, yeah, by most, wow, just he's persistent, bastard. This idea that there is good and bad, and then the need to make people good or bad leads people often to, they worship so-called enlightened people, or they denounce them as frauds. And I think this is just my opinion, but I think it might be healthier to do neither. People are just people. They do what they do with their conditioning and with whatever they can get away with. Some people are, their conditioning is such that if they can manage to get away with, having an organization that rakes in. Well, we're back, and you can see it's a little darker. It's because we had a little technical issue. I think it was caused by God, probably because he was pissed off because I didn't answer the phone, because he's like that jerk. So yeah, I don't remember where we were with that last question, but I was, blabbing and probably addressed most of it, and if not, goodness knows we don't need to hear more of what I have to say about it. But we do have a couple more questions, so let's look at those. So it says, when you say life isn't real, there are no boundaries, like an apple. It starts as a seed, then is a nice green apple, then turns brown. My question is, but when it's green and hard, it sure tastes good. Even if things are fleeting, you experience them, they hurt, make you feel bad or good. How can you say that's not real? Right. So if I have said those words, which I may have, it was not the way in which they were intended. So that, I guess, is the danger of trying to saying anything, which is that it can be heard other than the way that it's intended. That's the nature of communication. So I'm not, I've said this before. I think I'm not not really a big fan of denial. I know, that to me is like an inversion of belief. I'm not a big fan of belief of any sort. So more that I think it's valuable just to question the assumptions. If I've said something isn't real, then I'd have to know the context to know exactly what I was referring to. But it's only ever just it's not. It's I guess you could say it's a metaphor, but it's not the truth. So if I say something's not real, if I make a distinction between reality and non-reality, it's a false distinction, but it may be useful in a certain context just to differentiate between, let's say, the conceptual and the non-conceptual. So non-conceptual reality, let's say, is just what's obvious, what cannot be missed, and it can't be understood. And so I may say that a concept is not real, meaning that it's not, it doesn't have some sort of correlate in non-conceptual reality. It's not important that that's understood. I mean, I only say these things just because it may loosen a belief that may be held, that may be leading to some, or serving to reinforce some kind of, we'll just say, suffering of some sort. So the only idea is not that you understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is never that important. It's just that I'm suggesting that don't believe anything. Don't believe anything. Why? Because, the belief is not necessary. If you just drop all belief for a moment, you'll notice that what's happening is happening. It doesn't require any belief. And that's always the case. So, yeah. So I certainly have never intended to suggest that any experience is not real in as much as it is real. I mean, the experience is all that is real. if there's anything that we're going to say is real, and so if there's pain, then that's real. But the story about what the pain means, if we're going to make any kind of differentiation between real and not real, again, it's artificial, but I would say that the story about the pain is not real. Because the pain, what is being called pain, exists without the story, or independent of the story. I mean, these are not precise words. So don't take them literally, but you may get a sense of what I'm pointing to here. You can just notice that pain doesn't require a story. The pain is primary. The story doesn't actually affect or change the pain. So the story is not necessary. It's fine, the story is fine. We don't need to get rid of the story. But we can see the story for what it is, which is that it's not actually, it doesn't give us any control or power. It doesn't offer us any safety or security or certainty of any kind. That's all an illusion. And so the question here is, if things happen and they're experienced as pleasant or not pleasant, then then that's real. And I would say, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Of course. No need to deny that. I'd say denial of anything is not useful. It just reinforces the same old patterns of belief. But it is possible to just notice that whatever is happening is what's happening, and it doesn't require that we know what it is or label it. And I'm reminded of the, that story, which I think I've made reference to before. Alan Watts tells that story, or did tell the story about the Chinese farmer, and very briefly, he loses his horse, and then the neighbors say, "Oh, that's so bad," and he says, "Well, well, we'll see," or something like that. And then his son, and then they get the horse back, and everybody says, "Oh, isn't that wonderful?" And he says, "Well, we'll see." And then his son gets thrown from the horse and breaks his leg, and he says, "Oh, that's so terrible." You know. And then the army comes by, and they don't conscript his son because his son had the broken leg. So then people say, "Oh, well, isn't that so fortunate?" And so I'm reminded of that, just because the nature of good and bad is not an absolute thing. It's impossible to know whether something is ultimately good or bad, because ultimately good and bad doesn't exist. Ultimately, concepts do not apply. So it's fine that we have relative preferences and that we can have stories about good and bad. No problem with that. It's just that if we believe those stories to be true, well, then we're just in for a lot of unpleasantness, it seems to me. And we can see that none of it is the absolute truth. And that can be quite a lot more pleasant in a way. Not because it controls the situation in a way that we will necessarily like or not, but just because it relieves the stress, the completely made up and unnecessary stress of being someone who's both under attack and in need of defending itself. It relieves the burden of being at a distance and separate from whatever is happening. Not that that's ever the case, but just we can believe that that's the case, and so the burden of that belief can be relieved. That's all. Final question, which was from a YouTube commenter, and I like this one, so I threw it in because I thought I like it when people challenge me. So this is referring to another one of these videos, and this is in the video, Joey states that he and Eckhart Tolle are different people. And then later in the video, he, referring to Eckhart Tolle, says, "It's not my thing." I'm confused by this, as Joey's entire message seems to be that there is no one present. There isn't a self to be present or not present. Yet clearly he thinks of himself as a separate person from other people. He states that in the video. Isn't this a contradiction to the basis of his entire message? And so my sense of it is that anything that we can say, anything, is a story. There's no way around that. If we're communicating, then we're communicating in story and in metaphor. And so it's never going to be the truth. Just couldn't be. No possibility of it. And if we're searching for the truth as an understanding that can be expressed, we'll be disappointed in that. And so I would say, if you want to find contradictions, there will be no end to contradictions. I'm sure that in this video alone, there have probably been, because it's a long video, there's probably at least 100 contradictions. Probably more if you really wanted to be serious about your, search for contradictions. But, the thing is that I am not trying to sell you on a new belief system or a new perspective or a new religion or anything of that sort. I mean, I'm happy when people buy books. But I'm not trying to sell you any kind of way of seeing things or an understanding of any kind. Why would I? So if you're looking for a message in what I'm saying, my advice is don't. I'm not offering a message per se, other than, I guess you could say my message would be, look for yourself and question things, and don't believe anything, and let go. Relax. I guess you could say that's my message, but it's not a message of like, here are the, here's the Eightfold Path, memorize it. I'm not offering a cosmology. I'm not, so I'm not telling you that, like, there's God at the top, and then there's the archangels below that, and, like, I'm not giving you something of that sort that could be understood and that we could test for. Like, I could give you a test and determine if you've learned my message. I'm just offering the invitation for you to let go and look for yourself to see if the assumptions are actually the truth, or if they're just assumptions and can be let go. To see for yourself if reality as it is, whatever it is, actually requires any belief or any understanding. And I can propose to you my guess as to what you'll find. But I'm not ever asking you to take that on faith or to form that as a belief. Why? Why would I do that? I'm not interested in that. I don't. I'm not starting up some sort of religious organization. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking for anything really. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm indifferent. I can make the invitation. I can offer that. But I'm perfectly aware that I don't control what happens. I don't get to choose for you. And you can tear that apart and say, oh, well, look, I just made a reference to you and I'm separate from you. Well, okay, it's fine. I mean, we can certainly get hung up on that sort of thing. But I'm not concerned about a consistent teaching or a consistent message of any kind, because I see that as an artificial limitation, which would be useful or necessary, I guess, if there was a message or a teaching, if I was looking to like codify it so that it could be passed down. But I don't have that sort of sense of self-importance. It's not I don't have anything particularly valuable to offer to anybody. I'm just inviting. That's all. That's where it keeps coming up. It's just I just have an invitation, like, hey, it's not what you think. Or at least be willing to see, test it for yourself to see if it's what you think. And you may be pleasantly surprised, although it may be terrifying. To be really honest with you, it may be terrifying at first, for a while. Or it may not. There's no rules to this, but it may be scary to let go. To let go, because letting go is, in a sense, it's letting go of what you think you are, which for most of us, we've imagined ourselves to be something that needs defending, or to be improved in some way, right? Like, that's the whole notion of self-improvement, self-actualization, that, or, like evolutionary enlightenment and all this bullshit. Like there's something wrong with you. Really? Take a look. That's all. Just saying, take a look, and if you're willing, even though it's scary sometimes, just let go anyway. Because you may find out through that letting go that all the armoring and defense that was imagined to be necessary isn't. And it's not that it's like a morally superior state to discover that. It's not. But it's much nicer. That's all. And it's one of those things where when you discover something nice, particularly when what you discover is a relief from a fictional suffering, you want to share that with others? Sure, why not? See, I'm not hung up on the notion that that my actions have to follow logically from some idea of what my message is. My message is not that there is no person. That may be something that's discovered, but the idea that there's no person isn't the truth. And so any interpretation that relies upon that idea will be mistaken. So, as it turns out, the life is full of paradox, but the paradox is seen to be non-paradoxical when there's a letting go. The paradox is only apparently the case from a position where there's an either or there's some sense of separation that I've taken a stand. I know where I am, and everything else must exist relative to me. But when that's let go, then everything that is seen to be undoubted, indubitably. This. It's not even, there's no possibility of anything else. So there's no need to jump through a lot of conceptual hoops. I mean, it's fine if that happens, but it's seen that conceptual hoop jumping is of no real value, has no real meaning. It's just something happening like anything else. You're not going to get to the bottom of things. There's no need to get to the bottom of things because there is no bottom of things. Well, there you have it. I suspect is the longest and possibly the most rambling and the most chill, for sure, nothing in the middle episode yet. If you have made it this far, then nothing. I don't know that nothing. I would. Then you have. There you go. Anyway, it's always a pleasure. Sincerely, it's quite enjoyable. I mean, you can probably see that doing these, especially when they get long like this. I tend to kind of bliss out a little bit, so I apologize for that. But nice for me. So thank you for sending your questions, and thank you for your participation, and love to hear from you. So keep your questions coming, and when I've got enough questions and I have the time to do it again, I will record the next episode. Until then, take care. See ya.